Hello and welcome to Game and Read. I'm Erin.
My name is Peter.
And we are here for our next pairing, our Yakuza pairing. We are joined this pairing by a familiar face, a familiar voice, I suppose. Julia. Say hi, Julia.
Hello.
Julia was on one of our quarantine episodes a while back. We are still in quarantine at the time of this recording. But Julia is a college friend of ours, and we are very excited to talk to her about all things Yakuza.
Dedicated Chow parent right there.
I'm a Japanese culture enthusiast, and I love bad dialogue, so these align with my interests.
More importantly, we called this the Yakuza pairing, and that's because we can't come up with a creative title because the game is Yakuza 0, that's what we'll be playing, and then the book is titled Yakuza Moon, and that's just what it's called. So we're just going to call this Yakuza, and we're not going to add any of the other words. Julia, when we reached out to you because we wanted to do a pairing with you, the first game you threw out, because we were just like, oh, is there anything you'd been wanting to play, or, you know, just trying to pick your brain for ideas, you're like, oh, I really want to play one of the Yakuza games, I believe was your direct response. So why did you want to do one of the Yakuza games?
Well, I follow a lot of 20-year-olds on Twitter, and they had been posting some really exciting-looking GIFs of guys in flashy suits beating the shit out of each other. So I thought, wait, what is this game? Like, this looks right up my alley. There are bright lights of Shinjuku happening. So that was what caught my interest about these games. And also, one of our friends said it best, that this game is kind of a cross between a fighting game, an adventure game, and a dating sim. Always wanted to play a dating sim, still haven't done that. But this game does kind of feel like one, or what I imagine one to be.
And I know, Peter, you love the Yakuza games, so the minute Julia said Yakuza, Peter got this big excited look because he's like, oh, I get to make Erin play a Yakuza game.
Well, yeah, it's because I knew that I couldn't make you do it just through my own sheer force of will, but if I had one of your old friends in on it as well, and I didn't even picture the idea, it's going to happen.
It's true. Organically, and, you know, Peter, we're not even friends, so...
I know. But the thing is, if Peter and Julia come at Erin over one thing, Erin's going to do that one thing.
The peer pressure is too much. Husband and good friend. I can't resist.
Yeah, this was a psychic, just happenstance. The stars aligned, the moon and stars aligned.
And I also know, Julia, that you are, I think you said just a few minutes ago, a aficionado of Japanese culture. And that is something that I know has interested you at least for as long as I've known you, which is we're going on. Oh, God, we're like 10 years in now.
Yeah.
So, and I know you were in Japan sort of recent. Well, a couple years ago.
We actually went to the neighborhood that this neighborhood is based off of in the Yakuza games. And we didn't have any context, but Josh looked up this neighborhood and saw the giant Godzilla statue that is peeking out from behind a theater. And we were like, we saw that. Wow, we went there. But we didn't see any 7 or 8 foot tall guys threatening to steal all our money as we were weaving through the back alleyways. That was one thing that I was like, nope, did not encounter any of those folk.
Starting off with the game, Yakuza 0 came out back in 2015. It is a prequel, actually, to the entire Yakuza series, which has been having consistent releases since 2005, when it originally premiered on the PlayStation 2. The Japanese title for these games is actually Ryu ga Gotoku, which translates to like a dragon. So they don't just call it Yakuza in Japan. I guess that's a little too on the nose, even though in America we do have games that are just called Mafia. So I think it's following in that tradition with the localization, but they have a more, I'm going to say, interesting title.
Metaphorical, perhaps.
Yes, that you are, and you do play a character whose tagline is the Dragon of Dojima. Makes sense. The series follows the life of Kazuma Kiryu, a member of the Tojo clan who resides in Tokyo and primarily operates out of the fictionalized Kamurocho Entertainment District, which, as Julia was saying earlier, is based on the Kabukicho neighborhood of Shinjuku in Tokyo. Yakuza 0 is the 6th numbered game in the series. Yakuza 1 through 5 had come out previously, as well as a few spin-offs. And there are now 7 numbered Yakuza games throughout the years, not to mention the various spin-offs, like ones where you are in more of a samurai setting. There's one in which you're fighting zombies. There were a couple spin-offs for the PSP way back when. And there's also a Fist of the North Star, if you're familiar with that older anime set Yakuza game. So this is a style of game that I think lends itself to a lot of add-ons and tie-ins and all kinds of things like that.
I still want a PSP.
It's a little late to get one, but I don't think when I was looking at it, I don't think the PSP games came out in America, but you can always import them, see if you can figure out how to do that one.
It's true. Yeah. I think you need a Japanese PSP.
Most of the Yakuza games are focused on Kazuma Kiryu, and he is I would describe him as a very dour and honorable guy. He seems to always be very sad, but at the same time very fine with his lot in life.
I feel like joy is not an emotion he has ever felt. Not that he's depressed all the time, but he is just not a joyful person.
In Yakuza 0, he's really not. In some of the later games, he does get happy for some things. He coaches a baseball team in Yakuza 6. He opens an orphanage later on. I don't want to give big spoilers because I know Julia is interested in playing further, as other people might be as well. But he has a very full life and then also gets almost murdered all the time by various members of Yakuza clans, while he kind of vacillates between being a part of the Yakuza, being out of the Yakuza, and occasionally being in charge of the Yakuza. He goes all over the place throughout the 6 games in which he is a main character.
Honestly, he's a man of many talents, as I've learned on many a side quest. He's done it all. The man is a chameleon, and we just have no choice but to stan. He kind of reminds me of Cloud in Final Fantasy VII Remake, in terms of being a textbook strong silent type. He's just a hit with the ladies because nobody knows what he's thinking, because he probably isn't doing much thinking.
No, he's a man of action in that all he does is action. Yakuza 0 tells the story about Kiryu's early time with the Dojima family as a young, heavy enforcer for the Tojo clan. And due to his relationship with Kazuma, his mentor, the guy who was the benefactor of the orphanage that Kiryu grew up in, he becomes kind of stuck in this big scheme by lots of different people to try and claim this very small patch of unclaimed, undeveloped land in the middle of Kamurocho that is kind of the keystone to a large redevelopment plan. And he kind of haphazardly becomes the target of all this, despite not really being an important person himself quite yet. This is also set in the year 1988, which was right in the middle of a large economic boom in Japan, meaning that they are really hyping up just how much money is flowing through Kamurocho at the time. People are going to cabaret clubs. People are spending hundreds and thousands of yen just to, get cabs and get drunk and have a good time. And they really set up the decadence of this particular era that was later on followed by a fairly large economic bust in the 90s in Japan. Yakuza 0 has 2 protagonists, actually, it being kind of unique in the Yakuza series, because it also follows the story of Majima Goro, another Yakuza from the Tojo clan who is currently in, I would say, exile, having been part of a hit that really ruffled the feathers of the higher-ups. he's stuck managing a very successful cabaret club in Sotenbori, Osaka, based on Dotonbori, Osaka. And he has to just kind of keep making tons of money, and then kind of becomes embroiled in this same plot after he is asked to perform a hit on a unknown target. Having Majima as one of the kind of shared protagonists of Yakuza 0 is pretty distinct in that Kiryu is not the primary person, and also that Majima was not a new character. He had been in most, if not all, of the previous mainline games. However, he was generally an antagonist, not the main antagonist, but he fought Kiryu several times in, I know, Yakuza Kiwami 1. They actually went back and added in more fights where he would surprise Kiryu all the time and just challenge him to fights to make sure he's, up to snuff. And he kind of takes that role of being a kind of a friendly rival, I would say, that is very common as a anime and manga trope, where he wants to constantly challenge Kiryu just kind of for his own fun, and they don't like each other, but at the same time they have that desire to be close to one another and, improve one another.
Isn't it like stone sharpens stone or some shit like that?
I think it's steel sharpens steel.
Oh, okay, steel sharpens steel.
You know those sharp stones everybody loves nowadays?
Or like that Gatorade commercial that's like find your competition because they'll make you better.
Yes, it is that. And that is a common trope across a lot of fiction, but it is super big, especially in specifically shonen anime. You got your Naruto and your Sasuke, your Yugi and your Kaiba, as Julia points at her Yu-Gi-Oh shirt.
It's my favorite shirt.
Yes.
Your Ash and your Gary.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Satoshi and Shigeru. Well, I think this begs the question, what color sweat would Kiryu and Majima have? Because if they're Gatorade competition, like, you remember those commercials from the 90s where Venus and Serena had two different color sweat, like, I think that this is really what we came here to decide.
I'm really feeling like Majima sweats purple and Kiryu sweats green.
Okay. Now what I was going to guess.
I think that green is definitely at play here because he's trying to prove himself. He's got his eye on some prizes.
Well, I feel like Kiryu is a blue because he's cool as a cucumber. However, since he is the Dragon of Dojima, and I don't know if y'all have seen his back tattoo quite yet, it's not fully colored in Yakuza 0. Spoiler alert, I guess, if you care about tattoo colors. But he is a dragon, and I associate that with kind of a red, a big, powerful aura. However, I would say Majima's more of a green to me. He strikes me as kind of a green to a gold to, honestly, kind of a red, because he does become very fiery and passionate in future games, while he is a bit more buttoned down in Yakuza 0.
Yeah, I would agree. I think Majima might be green. But for Kiryu, I think that I would pick red. Not trying to make them Christmas colors, but he just seems to have either calm or danger mode, rage, red, violent action. Like two very, very distinct moods with him. So I think I'd give him red.
Now, I mean, this is a great pitch. If Gatorade wants to pay us to go purchase a license to use these characters, I'm sure Sega would oblige, because these games
Sega's
are all
way
about
more
product
questionable
placement.
Shit than Gatorade colors their characters.
Well, and this is something I'll get into here, and I know it'll come up later on our discussion, is that one of the things that makes the Yakuza games fairly successful is, one, they have pretty good sales numbers, especially in Japan. They only recently became bigger hits in the US in particular. However, they've always gone after real name brands to do lots of in-game sponsored content, as it were. So when you are running around Kamurocho, which is based on Kabukicho, you go to actual convenience stores that exist. You go to the Don Quixote that's very much based on the actual Don Quixote.
That's what they look like.
Yeah, that's what they look like. And they didn't just put that in for fun. They are, compensated for some of that. I don't know how much, but same goes for the alcohol brands in there. Suntory, I know, is a big believer and sponsor of the Yakuza games, so you can go to a bar and get every variety of Suntory Japanese whiskey you want.
Suntory makes freaking everything. They make tea. They make all kinds of drinks. It's like the Coca-Cola of Japan. Like, they are literally making everything. It's kind of crazy.
The last thing I'll say about Yakuza, just for this setup, is that they have become much more, like I was saying, popular in America, especially after the release of Zero, as well as the Kiwami remakes and the Yakuza 6 game. They have generally been scored pretty well as far as what I could find for American releases. They were kind of average in the 70s to 80s, like not amazing, but not terrible, especially when you kind of have the curve of what game scores normally are. However, at least the publication Famitsu out of Japan has always really liked all these games. I looked through their scores of all the iterations. I think the lowest was a B, and they gave Yakuza 5 a 40 out of 40, a perfect score for, that particular game.
Book for this pairing is Yakuza Moon by Shoko Tendo. This is a memoir, so it is a nonfiction autobiographical story of Shoko Tendo and her life. It was originally published in Japan in 2004 when she was 36, and then it was published in English for the first time in 2007. At this point, it has been translated into dozens and dozens of languages because it is pretty notable for being the first sort of eyewitness look into the Yakuza. So, born in 1968, Shoko Tendo is the daughter of a former Yakuza boss who was in charge of one of the sort of outfits in that reported, I guess, to the largest Yakuza sort of clan in Japan at the time. They were living in Osaka, and Shoko's father was, getting all these high risk, high reward. There's a lot of crazy stuff that we'll get into in our discussion episode. But he was leading that part of the Yakuza. And then at age 6, Shoko and her family have to deal with the fallout when Shoko's father's arrested, and subsequently they lose everything. They're broke and destitute. And so Yakuza Moon is her memoir of her life as a young child when her father was, in a really high position in the Yakuza, and after, and the impact that has on her, and the impact growing up in the 1980s. So she was, like I said, born in 1968. So she was hitting adolescence and young adulthood during the economic boom that we just talked about. That's referenced in Yakuza 0, and that is the setting for that game. So she talks about life in that same time period from her standpoint. I did a lot of searching for interviews, for anything about her now, and she has done very, very few interviews, especially with English publications. She's pretty scarce on the internet. I did find in a couple interviews that she overall had good reception for this story, even from members of the Yakuza, who told her that they sort of appreciated the frankness of her writing and that it was her experience. She, and we'll get into this later, but she has a lot of very strong negative feelings towards the Yakuza, but she doesn't generalize about things in a way that I think is expected. But she did say she still gets threatening phone calls. So she still lives in Japan. She has a teenage daughter now. She she seems to be doing that. She was according to a few interviews, she was working on another book about being a single mother in Japan, which in the little blurbs I saw, she talks just generally about how challenging that is and the stigma attached to that. But I can't find anything about it. I can't find anything. So I don't know if it was Japan only. This book has had a huge international impact. So it's a little surprising that there's nothing on a follow-up, but who knows?
Right. Well, and I think some of that speaks a little to, I mean, when we were searching around for just what book we could do with this, is the amount of just, normal literature and writing that you can get from Japanese writers that is available in English and seems to fit into this is, a little sparse. I know there have been some Japanese authors who've made it with kind of big literary hits, but just kind of more, when we were looking for more like, maybe a fictional crime story about the Yakuza could fit, especially with Yakuza 0 being kind of a very bombastic story. I've had very little luck finding anything that didn't seem kind of cheesy or anything that was even just published in English. And so when we found this, I was like, okay, I doesn't fit in perfectly probably, and I want to set that up just now going into it all. But the fact that she is born in literally the same year as Kazuma Kiryu, I'm like, okay, well,
in the same place, like in the same
right, Osaka and Tokyo,
location.
It's like, all right, I think we'll find some parallels, even if she wasn't actually roaming around beating up goons all day.
Well,
we'll
get
all
into
day.
that.
So I just wanted to at least bring that up, and that this is a heartfelt memoir about somebody going through, honestly, a lot of different things and trauma and experiences in her life, versus a guy who does go through plenty of trauma, but it's very weird and fictionalized versions of that.
And I will say that there's definitely a big content warning for this book. There are depictions of sexual violence and physical violence and abuse, drug use,
drug addiction.
So it's definitely not it's not a cheery, happy story. So if that is something, if you're considering reading this and any of those things are triggers for you, you might want to really think about whether you want to pick this up, because it's got a lot of really harrowing stories that are really important, but are very intense. And I did find there is a graphic novelization of this memoir out there too, which I think is a really interesting direction to go, given what I just said about the kinds of stories that Shoko Tendo talks about from her life. But that is also available in English, is the graphic novel.
That's all we have for you this week. I hope you enjoyed our introduction into this book and this game. This is a game I highly recommend you go give a try. It's a long game. You're probably not going to get all the way through it if you're starting right now, but I think it's very worthwhile and you have a good time. Additionally, while I'm not done with this book quite yet, it's a pretty short read, and it can be very digestible, and I think give a lot more context to the real-world side of what we're going to be talking about. But that's our intro for this. You can find all of our posts at gameandread.wordpress.com.
We are streaming on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, pretty much wherever you want to find
I'm now starting to upload stuff to YouTube if you, for some reason, listen to podcasts on YouTube, which I'm told is a thing.
And our YouTube is Game and Read. Our Instagram is also Game and Read. I am on social media, on Twitter at BookishTextPat, and on Instagram at A Tale of Two Shelves.
My Twitter is at Nerd in the World. Julia, where can people find you? All those 20-year-olds that you follow.
Yeah, my Twitter handle is at KO Cooked. My friend is trying to get me to join a fighting gym so I can live up to that name. And honestly, after playing this game and reading this book, I think I need to rethink it. So stand by. We'll see if that changes.
We'll see if we can turn you into a little scrapper.
Our intro music was written and performed by Avery Murchison. There is a link to his Bandcamp in the description.
Thanks for listening.
And we'll see you next time.
Live and breathe.